Okay, beautiful. We are golden. We are live on Facebook. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Today, I am joined by a few of the writers that are part of the locally published horror anthology, Collective Darkness. It's very exciting. We're going to be hearing some stories from Elizabeth Suggs, Jonathan Reddick, Alex Childs, Becca Rose, and perhaps a fourth person. We'll see. Before I turn the time over to them, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the upcoming events at our bookstore. Um, the second Wednesday of every month, we do our virtual Lit Knit, which is what it sounds like. You get crafty, you get chatty, work on any like knitting projects you have. It's always really fun. And our next one is going to be on the 11th at 6 p.m. On the 14th, we have Jacob Ethan Gibson talking about his new YA sci-fi book, Mariana the Moon Girl. That's going to be at 7 p.m. And he's going to be chatting with Annie Kruger, who is a fellow creative and the cover artist of the book. And then on the 18th, we have Dr. Kyle Myers talking about her memoir, Raising Them, which is about her experiences raising a child without a gender. And they are going to be talking with Pigeon Pagonis, who is an intersex artist and activist. It's the 18th at 2 p.m. And then if you like what you hear today, please consider supporting the writers and supporting our bookstore by buying a copy of Collective Darkness. You can do so through our website at www.wellerbookworks.com, over the phone at 801-328-2586, or in person at Trolley Square. And with that all done, I am going to turn the time over to them now, and we're going to listen to some spooky stories. I'm very excited.
Hi, everyone. I'll read first. My name is Elizabeth Suggs, and my story is Into the Dark. It's the last story. So let's get started. It started because of her, my wife. It's funny. When I think back on it, she never did anything different. She read outside, away from me. Whenever I came home, she left the room. If I said hello, her eyes flashed anywhere else. Yet that day, my mind full of gin and aching, I saw a laugh dance upon her lips. In that moment, she was laughing at me, and I hated her with every fiber of my being. But it was all false. My imagination. If I had been sober, I wouldn't have seen her joy because it never would have been there. She never smiled. She had stopped smiling years before. Stopped laughing. Stopped speaking. I had no one for our entire marriage. She was a block of stone. So it was easy to give in to my desires, my rage. When I picked up the knife, she didn't say a word, nor did she look at me. It was just like her to pretend I didn't exist. But that night was different. Neither I nor the horrible pounding in my head would let her forget who I was. I wanted her to know I was there. I needed her to know I was there. I bashed her head in with the handle of the knife to remind her I was there. I just wanted her to make some sound. Bash. One in her temple. Bash, bash. Another in eye, in her nose. Bash. Blood spilled everywhere. She grunted, but never screamed. Never pleaded for me to stop. Just watched me. Took the pain as if she knew all along where the silence would eventually lead us. The ugliness of her death wore on me, and rather than feel remorse, I hid her. I needed those all-knowing eyes, gray with death, and lips once so pink turned blue, hidden from my view. Though to hide her was almost unnecessary. No one asked me about my wife. No one noticed. Before her death, she never left the house. She didn't have a job. Her parents were dead. She didn't speak to her siblings. It was too perfect. No one would have ever found out if I hadn't made the call. Dialed 911. Listened to the person on the other end ask about my emergency. Don't remember speaking, telling them anything. My name, my address, though I must have. Within minutes, there sat a car in my driveway. Blue and red lights flashed up through the front room's window and into the living room. I ran out the back door. The fear of punishment became the devil's fist clutching my heart, pulsating with each new beat. I sped my legs faster down the street, faster down between more houses. Maybe I was spotted. Maybe police asked my neighbors and found answers, though I doubted it. The night was dark. Not even the moon came out to spy at the ruckus. I ran until my lungs were about to burst. I bent over my knees to catch my breath. When I looked up, I saw a doorway bathed in blackness, a stark contrast to the brightly lit street and nearby homes. Without hesitation, I slipped inside and slammed the door shut, ensconced by protective darkness. I pressed my back against the door and drew in a breath. I allowed relief to sweep over me until something touched my arm. That something was sharp and dragged along my skin as if it were a nail. The nail ran up my body and paired with an animal's breath, hot and wet. Both breath and nail ran up to my throat and stopped as light spilled over me. Blinking away the night blindness, I saw a feeble old man hunched over a doorway leading into a house. I stood in a garage that had been transformed into a room. A thin cot lay invitingly beside a few shelves, some empty, while others held knickknacks. Growls came from the corner. Somehow I knew whatever thing touched me now stared from those shadows. "Don't worry," said the old man. "He won't come out in the light." I dared not to move for fear the lights would break and the beast would come out again, breathing down my neck. "And who might you be?" the old man asked. A wry smile spread between his cheeks. He tried to lower his hands, but as if glued like chicken wings, they remained in their spots. He had just enough reach to wave me in. "Come inside," he continued, his back to me. "Explain yourself over some tea." The tea tasted like the salt from my sweat made in the midst of my most fiendish acts. The sweat which dropped off my brow onto my lips to kiss her blood. I looked down at my tea, stray leaves swirled around the cup, and for a moment, I thought I saw myself with my wife reflected inside. But then her angular visage vanished. "What is in this?" I asked. "Just a little something extra. Now tell me, what is it you need?" I'm desperate. The words leaked out before I had a chance to catch them. I saw an open door, took the opportunity. We sat at his kitchen table, neighboring the closed garage door. I was across from the old man, watching him. He finished off the remains of his tea, then drew out his old, withered tongue. It traced his mouth in wrinkled flaps of skin. "You should not always take the first open door you see," he cautioned. "You won't always be lucky." I swallowed, then looked up to a clock above our heads. It ticked, ticked away the time I needed more of. How long would it take for the police to show up, to ask questions? Whether or not they'd searched the entire neighborhood was beyond me. It was that foreboding fear that drove me to ask my desperate words. Help me hide. Why should I help you? The man asked, near laugh. Menace played around his eyes. He smiled. A trap had been set, and I fell willingly inside. I can't offer much, but I can give you my service. Help me and I'll clean. I'll fix up your house. He held up a finger before I could finish and swept himself up from the table. His knobbly little joints jangled together as he walked. He made his way over to a drawer near his fridge and picked out a set of keys. He clanked and cracked his joints back to his seat. He set the keys in front of me. I've needed help in the garage, he said. Help me with the beast, and I'll help you hide. My cheeks flushed. Relief struck me dumb. It made me slump in my chair with my head over the still steaming tea. No longer did it smell like sweat from her death. Rather, a strange something else. Something mossy. I could not place it. Tell me, mister. His voice shifted my attention. Clyde Collins. Lost in thought, he folded his fingers near his lips and pressed on wisps of facial hair. Frowning, he asked, Tell me, Clyde Collins, why do you need me to help you hide? I straightened in my chair and picked up the set of keys. I ran my fingers along the teeth of an old copper key, then flashed my eyes to his. The police think I killed my wife. Did you? He asked. I placed the keys back on the table, my fingers still at the teeth. Does it matter? I shot back. A smile leaked onto the old man's features, carving deep wedges at the corners of his eyes. He laughed. No, I guess it doesn't. My name is Rolf. As if the conversation excited the beast, it growled and gnawed at the garage door. Sharp claws tore at corners, broke up boards, but never did they tear through. Never did light pierce between splintered wood onto his beastly being. What do you need help with? I asked, desperate to get the beast out of my mind. He'll help with house chores and get him food, he answered, glancing at the garage door. His eyes flashed to mine as he stood. You must be tired. Let me get you some bedding. Where will I be sleeping? Smiling, he turned as the gnawing on the door ceased. There was only breathing, harsh, peppered with thought, with patience. Rolf turned back to me, smiling still. In the garage, of course. The only other bed is the cot. He made sure to expose his teeth as he spoke. It's why I gave you those keys. One is to the front door, the other to the garage. I'll be locking the door every night. You'll need those to get back inside. I lay in the cot with a flimsy blanket half drawn over me and half pushed against the wall. The pillow reeked of bad breath and old shoes. For that reason, I kept my head turned up toward the ceiling. I stared at the bright orange garage light directly above the cot. I could hear the beast approach, but it never penetrated the light, as if it was caged within the darkness. The front doorbell rang, echoing softly in the hall. The door opened, people talking, laughter here, chuckle there. The words were too quiet and became a rumbling noise beneath my thoughts. The growl rose in the corner. The beast felt my apprehension. Both it and I knew the only sort of people to ring an old man's doorbell at such an odd hour would be police. I kept my muscles tense, tenser than before. The smell of the pillow was almost forgotten as I strained to understand the rumbles. Above me, the lights blinked, stilling my thoughts. Growls made from the depths of my damned soul grew in the dark. This sound dominated the room, and then the light went out. Clyde, came a husky voice inside my head. I sat up, rolling my legs over the bed. My hands cusped the blanket, pulling it from the wall to my body. I was so cold, colder when the voice spoke. Its words froze my body. The darkness stole my voice, so I whispered, "Hello?" "Hello," it replied in mid-laugh. Saying nothing more, my stomach lurched. The voices from the other room had disappeared. I strained to continue listening. "Do you want to know what hell is like?" The lights above me flickered back on. The monster stole back into the darkness. Those devilish eyes waited, taunted. They grew hard with want, with need. But the light drew away his power. Momentarily, I was safe. The old man stood at the entrance, alone, one foot in the garage, another out. His hand still cupped the light switch. His eyes were old and withered, even more so in the light. "Not quite time for that, like I'm afraid. Not anymore." He spoke, taut and brisk. He motioned me inside. "You just had some visitors. They left, of course." My shoulders relaxed. "I have some questions. I'd like you to join me for more tea. Maybe this time you'll finish yours." He chuckled as we made our way back to the same chairs, hot tea waiting. Okay, so to find out more, you're going to have to read the rest. Now it's going to be Jonathan's turn.
Okay. All right. That was kind of spooky. I'll be reading from Padua's Eyes. 3 miles outside the tiny 3 miles outside the tiny hamlet of Tropenhaus, a lanky figure lurked in the shadow of a tall oak, stalking his nearing prey. The pale moon rested behind the treetops. The hunter was guided through the darkness by unnatural providence. The prey smelled spectacularly succulent to his acute senses, so potent, so alluring. The hunter chose to remain hidden and let the blood come to him. He felt it approach, felt it advance to the dense black thicket. The dark figure's hunger intensified the closer his prey neared. The figure watched his quarry emerge from the thick brush and stop beside a fallen tree. The hunter stepped forward. The howling wind disguised his footfall as he approached. The wild boar sharpened its yellow and brown tusks against a lifeless trunk. The hunter's tattered cloak flew back in the brisk air. A lumbering shape haunted the boar's shadow. He stepped closer, and yet again closer. A cold silhouette, merely resembling the shape of a man, loomed clandestinely over the boar, inching forward, ever eager, ever hungry. The moon moved out of hiding, revealing the towering mountain range to the west. He was even closer to them than he predicted. The hunter carefully veiled his withered hood over his pallid face against the moonlight. His garments stunk of death and decay, but he was careful to approach from downwind. With a blistered and blackened tongue, he licked his parched, anxious lips in anticipation. He was within grasp, his teeth extended in preparation. His eyes grew bright red. He raised his hand high for the kill, his sharp claws and fangs extending even further, glinting in the soft starlight. The wind settled. The only sounds were the whispering breeze slipping between the leaves and the many tiny legs scattering from the hollowed trunk. He watched as the boar snatched a mouthful of escaping crawlers. Muffled cries in the distance suddenly broke the stillness. Faint human shouts were heard. The townspeople. Since the early evening, their bloodhounds had tracked his lingering scent after he was caught in the company of several tender prize porkers. He had not even had a taste. His fangs had not yet broken skin. He had only caught a fragrance, a wisp of delightful indulgences before the angry pig farmer had seized him by the neck and tore him from the pig pen. There was a brief struggle. A bell was struck, and the town was up in arms. The pig farmer's arm was shattered while it swung into the encircling mob. Vampire! An elderly woman had cried, seeing his skin shine like dark crystal in the moonlight. The vampire had burst through the furious crowd and made his way into the woods. After an hour of restless wandering, he had assumed they had given up on him. He was wrong, and they were now almost upon him again. The lights of torches shone through the glade. The boar, disturbed by the lights, then seeing the shadowy hunter, sped off through the trees. The heads of the townspeople were coming into view as they emerged from behind a lifeless knoll. The dark figure looked to the mountain, so close. Though hungered and tortured night and day for want of food, weakly and feebly the vampire flew as fast as his spidery legs would take him. He reached the gentle brook and turned to follow it, hoping the hounds would lose his scent. They would not. He ran upstream for about 2 miles until he reached a small farmhouse. The lights were out. It was late. The residents would be asleep in their beds. He spied a barn and adjacent stable. An open window drew his keen eye to the most delicious-looking stallion leg, shaking off flies in its sleep. He knew he had to keep moving, but could not keep up his pace for long without precious sustenance, precious blood. He had gone so long without flesh, maybe weeks, he could not remember. He crept up to the stable and pushed open the creaky door. He admired the magnificent and extremely durable German lock and chain. It was of the finest craftsmanship, unbreakable. But someone forgot to lock it, he thought to himself, someone very foolish. He entered. The horses were all asleep. The stable presented a banquet of fresh meat. He salivated from the bouquet of well-circulated blood, the healthy kind that hungry vampires crave. Drool dribbled down his cheek, which he wiped with a ragged sleeve. His tattered cuff was stained scarlet from prior feasts. He did not have time for sampling. So which would it be? The beautiful mare, the handsome stallion, or the giant hulking Clydesdale? Then something small and frisky caught his eye. A small white horse danced spastically, trying to free itself. Panic-stricken, it managed to break some of its cords. It was a spirited little fighter. A prancing pony, how sweet, he thought to himself. He was lured toward it by the intoxicating aroma of fear. When he neared the tiny paddock, the pony turned around and kicked him hard with its short hind legs. The night stalker growled, but soon calmed, knowing he was to blame for the blunder. The sound of the frantic hoof stomping by now woke the other animals, which began demonstrating their own trepidation. The tumult was heard in the farmhouse, stirring the residents from their beds. Lamps were lit. The bloodsucker cooed its victim into a hypnotic slumber, then sank his fangs deep into the pony's back leg. He knew where to find the rush of life-giving blood. The proprietor of the farm came out of the house half-dressed. He carried an old lantern hastily trimmed. Not another wolf, he said to his young daughter. Cordelia, get back in there before he carries you off by the neck. He had dealt with wolves in the past. It was a nasty business, but a necessary one. Cordelia shuffled her feet on the veranda. She had never seen a wolf before. She only knew what she read in stories. They didn't seem too much trouble for Peter in Peter and the Wolf. Then she remembered she had forgotten to secure the stable after riding. As the bloodsucker purged the pony of its essential fluids, the farmer entered the stable, pitchfork in hand. The vampire did not notice as he continued suckling at the pony's hindquarters. He did not have time to relish the moment, but the taste was delectable, if not fully savored. The farmer raised the pitchfork high as he neared for the strike. Then his daughter, watching her beloved pony collapse to the floor, cried out from the stable door, Padua! The dark intruder turned to see the approaching farmer as he stabbed down into his unprotected chest, causing a shriek audible for miles. The farmer removed the tool to strike again. The vampire grappled with him for the weapon, holding the sharp end and swinging the pitchfork. The farmer would not release his grip and was flung into a crate of oats. Cordelia ran to her father. The crate had burst open and he lay on it, blood soaking into the feed. His chest was heaving. She was only 14. She had lost her mother to pneumonia the previous winter. She had lost her brother to war. She saw her beloved pony, Padua, lying lifeless in the corner. Now she was losing her father to a fiend of the night. His side was impaled on a wooden splinter. She took his hand, freckled with cherry-stained oats. Blood flooded the farmer's chin as he tried to speak. He tried to call her name, but he could not. Yet his eyes told her that all she needed to hear. He loved her. In an apparent state of bloodlust, the dark stranger rushed to the old farmer, knocking the girl aside. She scrambled to her feet in search of a weapon. When she found a sledgehammer heavy enough to smash a skull like a lemon, she dragged it across the floor. The predator was now missing a sleeve, now tied to her father. The sight of this enraged her even further. She tried lifting the hammer, but the imbalance of it made it too difficult to manage, too heavy. She discarded the huge hammer and found a scythe, which was far too unwieldy, too long. She dropped the scythe and reached for a short sickle off the wall. Just right. She crept up behind the kneeling figure, as her father had done. The crate shard had been removed from the farmer and lay beside him. She overheard him mumbling gravely, "Sorry, the only way," before sinking his teeth into her father's shoulder. She was too late. His fangs had penetrated his flesh. Cordelia sliced the sickle down the vampire's back, cutting him, ripping his cloak, and staining his back with the darkest shade of blood she'd ever seen. It was too black to be blood, too rich, too soiled with evil. He wailed. His tattered rags were now drenched in the sordid fluid. He rolled into an empty stall. New light filled the stable entry as a young farmhand entered with an astonished look. "Cordy!" "Billy!" She was not expecting him. She turned back to her father, whose lifeless face had yielded its last tear. A man from the search party ran in with a pack of dogs, seeing the scene and the creature hiding in the corner. He shouted to the throng of townspeople making their way up from the brook, "Hello! In here! The devil is in here!" Billy ran to the frightened Cordelia. She would not relinquish the sickle to him. Her face was as pale as the vampire's, as pale as her father's. She sobbed into Billy. Tears trickled down his shirt. She began to tell Billy about her father while he kept watchful eye on the creature crawling toward the rear door. The rest of the mob quickly made its way inside. The vampire, though fed, was weak and wounded, but still dangerous. He stammered to his feet and jumped through the open window, fleeing westward, leaving a dark, wet trail across the dirt. Most of the crowd followed. The few who stayed tried to comfort the poor girl with their talk of vengeance. "Murderous creature will pay," one promised. It was all talk, and she knew it, but it was cathartic to hear. Is that a good place to start? Okay, next is Alex. I'm going to read from Pond Scum.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Childs, and I wrote the short story Pond Scum. I'm going to go ahead and read part of that for you. Isaac tugged at the no trespassing sign.
Your audio is not working out.
Oh, it's not? Can you hear me now? Is that any better?
I can hear you okay.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so we're good. No worries. Okay, just in case it didn't come through before, my name is Alex Child, and I wrote the short story Pond Scum. Isaac tugged at the no trespassing sign that hung from the broken fence. He watched as Corey slipped through the peeled back wire and called for him to follow. When he didn't move, Corey grabbed his arm and tugged him through. The two boys followed the forbidden path until it led them into a clearing. They stood at a small knoll overlooking a sickle-shaped pond. Thick ebony algae nearly concealed the dark water. A whiff of neglected decay drifted in the air. Isaac rubbed his nose at the smell. "We have a fountain in my house. It gets mold in it sometimes, but nothing like this." "Could be for attention from the old mines," Corey suggested. He arched his back and walked down the steep embankment with his knees bent sharply. Maybe there are some fish we can catch, he said, dropping his feet into the water. It was surprisingly cool. Isaac followed and examined the area around them. There was no vegetation growing along the bank. It was as if all the plants were trying to run away from the pond. Perhaps it wasn't the best idea to get close. Corey examined the pond with wide eyes. A clear layer of liquid rested above a bed of gray wisps that swayed with the currents of the pool. Just past the wisps, the clear liquid turned murky with splotches of black swirling in circular patterns. This water's weird, man, Corey said under his breath. Isaac crouched at the pool's edge on all fours. The imagery was somehow enchanting. I've never seen water like this before, he agreed. It might not be water. Maybe it's pond scum, Corey suggested. Isaac laughed. That seems unlikely. Pond scum doesn't look like this. What do you mean then? Corey splashed water at Isaac. I think that's probably not a good idea, said Isaac. My mom told me some of these old mining ponds have chemicals in them that can give you cancer. Corey shrugged. My grandma had cancer and kicked its ass. Plus, I'm way stronger than her, so I'll be fine. He smashed his feet through the liquid like an old-time grape stomper. The scum of the pond temporarily moved away from his legs before snapping back into place. That's where you gotta be careful, Corey said with a smile. He took a few more steps in. It's not too deep. Well, it probably gets deeper in the middle, Isaac said. Maybe you should get out. Nah, I can swim, Corey said with a dismissive wave. He quickly changed the subject. Want a sandwich? Isaac smiled and nodded. Catch, Corey said, tossing a sandwich that he kept in his fanny pack. Isaac's hands flailed helplessly over his head as the sandwich hit him in the stomach and dropped towards the circular pool. He picked it up before it fell in the water and unzipped the bag. I'll be back. Gonna make a raft, Corey said as he got out of the pond and climbed the small hill in search of wood. Isaac replied by lifting a hand with a half-raised thumb. He scratched his nose as the strange scent wafted through the air. He couldn't quite put his finger on what it smelled like, but it somehow reminded him of mildew and laundry. Puzzled, he looked around. There was nothing but trees, dirt, and the polluted water in his surroundings. He didn't think the trees or dirt made the smell, so it had to be the pond. I still don't like this water, he murmured between mouthfuls of his sandwich. Isaac continued to eat in silence. He took another bite when he realized that it was too quiet. There was no sound. The birds that flew by uttered no notes. The wind was silent. His chewing created no audible noise. The ponds bubbled loudly, making Isaac jump. He stared into the water in a trance. Something about this water felt off. The sound of snapping branches careened down the pit, breaking Isaac from his daze. Catch, Corey yelled. He threw another sandwich. Down the hill. Isaac jolted to catch it, but it sailed through the air and fell into the pond. A small circular wake appeared, bubbled, then hissed. The plastic-wrapped meal failed to appear. Corey stood down the incline like an Olympic skier and kicked up a wave of dirt and gravel as he went. But when he stopped, the hissing was still there, teasing them, although Corey failed to notice it. Feast your eyes, young one, Corey said as he walked ankle-deep into the pool. Isaac saw the small gray hairs in the liquid stiffen. They tilted in unison, pointing in his direction. It looked like a million tiny fingers stretching outward. Corey raised his hand high over his head. He held a combination of several small twigs and branches bent over and around each other in the shape of a rough square. I hereby christen thee the USS Scum, in honor of our pond here, Corey said with a spit to his side, not caring that the spit and dirt cocktail landed on his forearm. Looks like shit. It's gonna sink, Isaac laughed. Go to hell, Corey said. Prepare yourself to witness the maiden voyage of the U.S. Navy's greatest ship. He stooped over, his hands at each side of the crude raft, and gently lowered it into the water. When its balance was ensured, he released his grip. Tsunamis instantly formed at each of the raft sides. It dropped beneath the surface like a lead cannonball. The drab wisps entangled around the branches and twigs, dragging the humble raft helplessly into the abyss. Shit, 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 Corey yelled. He violently shoved the dark wisps aside. The ashen tendrils coiled around his limbs. With panicked vigor, Corey stooped onto his knees and plunged his arms deep into the pond. Isaac watched as a mixture of horror and laughter worked its way through his features. The laughter won. Wow, that was sad. Shut up. Corey paid little mind to his now soaked clothes. On his hands and knees, he scoured the bottom of the pond for any sign of his lost ship. The gray broth circled the base of his neck as he spent several long minutes searching. His extremities were all but covered by the dreary, grasping tufts. He sighed and stood. The gray threads slid from his body and wobbled as he left their reach. Fluid spilled down his dripping clothes. He turned toward Isaac and saluted. God bless those brave sailors. Their families are going to be pissed that they died fighting some water, Isaac said with a smile. Corey rocketed his hands to his sides. They died defending the world from this evil water, and their sacrifice will not be in vain. Corey pointed at the unsettled gray water and said, I hereby declare this pond an enemy of the people. You really can't find it? Isaac asked. Nope, it's gone. Blown up, most likely. Maybe someone hit a bomb in the engine room or a terrorist blew it up. Corey exited and plopped down next to Isaac. Oh well, where's my sandwich? Corey asked. It's gone, Isaac said, shrugging. It fell in. And you didn't grab it? Corey said in disbelief. It sank before I could. Isaac kept the mood light, but he wondered if it was normal for water to behave this way. Where's the sandwich? Now the raft had vanished into the pond. It unsettled him, yet it was almost impossible to pry Corey from whatever activity he was focused on, so he decided to wait this out, at least for a little while longer. That was my only food, you know. The next meal is coming out of your paycheck, soldier, Corey said as he tossed Isaac a handful of smooth stones from his pocket. I'm sure we can afford it, Isaac said while examining the collection. He set it down, selecting a particularly smooth stone. He arched his hand back, carefully calibrating the angle it would strike, and flung. It rode through the air, parallel to the pool's surface, and seemed to speed up as it approached. The stone struck the liquid surface and unceremoniously dropped like a bowling ball. Corey snickered. Isaac examined the small pile of round stones before selecting a sleek circular one. He wrapped his fingers around the rock's smooth edges, then swung his arm out several times and examined the angle. The stone remained tucked between his fingers. You're not pitching for the Yankees, just chuck it, Corey said. Isaac slung the round pebble. His arms sailed in a perfect arc and channeled his full strength. It glided beautifully through the air. At the stone's first contact with the pond, it vanished below the gray threads. Corey cackled. His volume notably increased. You got twigs for arms or what? At least my balls have dropped. Isaac tossed random stones from the pile in quick succession. Each stone was immediately consumed by the water and left large reverberating wakes as fluid splashed onto the shoreline. Corey stood up. Well, we can't sail in it. We can't skip rocks in it. I got an idea. He sloshed out to the water and searched the nearby earth. Finally, he picked up a lizard. Isaac frowned. Corey wasn't the most reliable person when it came to animals. You gonna drown a man? Lizards can't swim. Don't be silly. This is a pocket lizard. They're awesome swimmers. Besides, he's got the world's greatest swimming coach right here to help him figure it out. Corey held the lizard in an open palm and stepped into the liquid. You should help. This is going to be a big moment for the little guy, and he needs all the support he can get. Isaac remained seated. I don't want to get my pants all wet. You're wearing shorts and you got two bony legs. They're holding you up just fine right now. Isaac sighed. He reluctantly removed his socks and shoes. He stood and stared at the murky fingers hiding just beneath the pond's surface. They were somehow intimidating. Don't make me pull you in. Isaac hesitantly dropped one foot into the pool, ready to yank it back out in an instant. The chilled water gleefully wrapped around his foot, providing frigid relief from the summer heat. A small undercurrent swelled along the swampy bottom, but it somehow failed to move the dull-colored threads. They continued aiming directly at Corey. Corey cupped the small lizard in his hands and said, Come on, man, he wants to swim. Isaac dropped his other foot into the gray broth. Mud oozed between his toes as the unsettled wisps of darkness stagnated around his lower leg. He slid close to Corey. Corey bent carefully, holding the lizard just above the surface. Okay, boy, I'm going to hold you while you get your sea legs. Don't you worry. He gently lowered his hands into the fluid until the fluid seeped between his fingers and pooled around the creature's legs. Attaboy. Isaac looked down. The wisps had grown. They were now just a few inches beneath the surface and had begun to form a thin circle around his ankles. He raced back to the shoreline. Dude, those things are wrapping around my leg, Isaac said. Don't be such a baby. See, we just wrapped shit up. Besides, you're scaring the lizard, man. Isaac could see the creature supported over the water. The wisps were touching the surface now. The poor thing turns its head sporadically, its chest expanding and contracting rapidly. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Now, leave you a little bit to read when you go ahead and pick up your very own copy of Collective Darkness. Thank you all for listening. And next up, we have got Becca Rose.
Hello, my name is Becca Rose, and I will be reading a portion of my story, Brisket Please. Bright red blood pooled from the wound on Vanessa's stomach. She grabbed the hole, trying to keep her insides from falling to the floor. Her attacker watched as she fell to her knees, a sick smile on his face as he raised the blade. She closed her eyes as tears flowed. Cut! The camera crew put down their equipment to get snacks. Chad Murphy, director, made his way over as Don knelt by Nessa, careful not to get blood on parts of his costume that were supposed to be clean. That was beautiful, Don said, his cruel grin traded for a soft smile. Nessa blushed. Don Winters played the perfect villain, but damn, he was attractive. His light brown hair, worn shaggy, crystal blue eyes, and a killer body. This was Nessa's third time working with him on their specialties, horror flicks. Ness, Chad called, making Don slip away as Chad approached, waving his hand to get her attention. Nessa could just make out the scar on his wrist under the lights, barely noticeable if he didn't know it was there. That was great, but I think I want some sound. I know your guts are spilling out, death is coming, but give us one big scream as the knife comes down. Sell your last shot. Nessa nodded, irritated that she was still on the floor while everyone was taking a break. Couldn't someone help her with the guts? Chad patted her hair, which made her freeze. I'll have someone bring you a drink, he said absently. Then we'll reset the innards and reshoot. He walked away to find help. Nessa resembled her father, Chad, with his whitish blonde hair and deep green eyes. He'd shoved her into the film business as soon as he'd won full custody, saying her adorable looks were perfect on screen. Her child chub turned to curves as she aged, giving her more opportunities. Nessa stuck with acting, but moved out at 15 for a little freedom. Miss Murphy. Her assistant, Hannah, came rushing over, a water bottle with a straw in hand. She held it out so Vanessa could rehydrate. I've got a meal in your trailer for when you're done. Hannah Green, an aspiring actress, was eager to please. She was as cute as a button, with wide brown eyes, a spatter of freckles, and curly red hair. She did anything Vanessa said, as long as Chad didn't get in the way. Do you want me to call the crew to reset the guts? Hannah asked. Yes, please, Vanessa said gratefully. She was exhausted. She hadn't been sleeping well recently. Add that to the long days of shooting, and she was always running on empty. Caffeine and concealer could only get her so far. Luckily, this was her last day shooting for a horrific hotel. The crew descended in a flurry, getting her up. The guts went back in the fake stomach, and the blood around them was reloaded. The makeup team freshened up her cuts. Someone put more congealed blood on the head wound she had gotten in the scene before. Her character was the last survivor in a hotel full of guests. No happy ending here. Horrific Hotel was highly anticipated. Nessa hated to admit that Chad was a great director. The fans came out in droves. Nessa even had a small following. It was a tightrope to walk, keeping the fans in love but not obsessed. She was lucky to never have been in danger, but Dawn had had some scary incidents. The girls who loved him weren't violent, but they were determined to invade his life. It was a wonder how he had stayed so sweet to everyone. Dawn got back into place, giving Vanessa a wink. Action. Nessa backed into a corner, looking wildly around as Dawn approached her, knife raised. She gave a guttural sound when he slashed her stomach. The guts spilled. She fell to her knees, eyes wide as he smiled and brought the knife down. Nessa closed her eyes, let out a terrified scream, and the retractable knife hit her neck. The blood contraption on her shirt went off, spurting blood past the fake blade. She fell to her side, and Dawn pulled the knife away. Some twitching and crying, then holding her breath with eyes wide open, and she was done. Cut. That's a wrap on this scene. Ness, you're free to go. The crew clapped politely for Nessa as she sat up and let the guts fall away. No need to keep them on her. Don came to help her up. Hey, he said softly. That was really good. Thanks, Don, Nessa said appreciatively. She wiped some blood before it dripped into her eyes, looking up at him. She was very aware that he hadn't let go of her hand. Hey. He glanced around nervously. I know I've still got a few scenes, but when you're done, do you want to get a bite to eat? Nessa's heart stopped. Don Winters was asking her out. Wait, was he really? Don was more famous, older at just over 30, and mature. Like just the two of us? She asked, seeking clarity. If you wouldn't mind, he said with a sheepish smile. I've wanted to spend time with you since our first job together. Nessa's mouth went dry. Was this happening? She didn't date much. It was hard to find the time. Dating another actor was nice because you understood the busy schedule, but time together was hard to get unless you wanted to fly all over to maybe get a full day together. Dating co-stars was easier, but not a good idea if you wanted to keep working together after the breakup. Dating anyone who didn't act could be more relaxing, but they didn't like the long hours or any romantic scenes. In short, that led to only a few guys in Nessa's life. She wondered if she should risk it with Don. He seemed like he was mature enough to handle an actor-actress relationship. Sure, she croaked out. That sounds like fun. He beamed down, then glanced at her lips. Vanessa gave an inner squeal. She might actually get to kiss Dawn Winters tonight. Perfect, he said. He reached up and dabbed a bit of blood away from her cheek, which was useless by the amount of blood she was covered in, but Vanessa was grateful for the contact. I bet we'll be done by 8. See you then. He squeezed her hand before leaving to get fixed up for the next scene. Vanessa almost floated out of the soundstage. Hannah trailed behind. Miss Murphy? She asked when they got outside. Are you all right? Just great, Vanessa responded with an airy laugh. They entered her trailer, and Vanessa's senses freaked out at the scent of food. There was a burger. Not a burger, the burger. Urban Skillet's brisket burger with an order of onion rings stuffed inside. All Vanessa had eaten since she got to set at 6 was some yogurt and berries. Now it was after 3. Her stomach rumbled. Hannah, she breathed. Are you the best person in existence? The girl giggled, blushing. Did you bring the liquid gold as well? Hannah crossed to the mini fridge and pulled out a small container. Vanessa's stomach growled even louder as she stared at the white sauce. Hannah's cream and wine-based sauce was a secret recipe and Vanessa's drug. Hannah was too busy to make it all the time, but when Vanessa could get it, she freaked out. That sauce paired with the burger, her mouth watered. Clean up while I warm up the sauce, Hannah suggested. You can eat before we go. Reality hit. Vanessa had about 5 hours until her date. She'd be hungry again, but she had gotten to sit in pajamas. The exhaustion was hitting as well. With traffic, it would take over an hour to get to her home in Beverly Hills, an hour to get ready, and an hour to get back. Add the time it took to eat and clean up here. Hannah, Vanessa moaned. She covered her face with her hands. I know you do way too much, but can I ask you for something else? Of course, Hannah chirped, as happy as ever. I have a date with Dawn after the shoot. What? Hannah yelped. Vanessa dropped her hands. Hannah's face shifted through emotion, shock, confusion, and excitement. That's great. I have to say, the chemistry between you two is undeniable. Vanessa dropped her hands, grinning like a schoolgirl. Really? Oh, Hannah, that means a lot. The problem is that we think they'll wrap up around 8. Ah, Hannah sighed. I see the problem. Okay, here's what we do. Clean up as best as you can, eat, and get a good nap in. I'll get some supplies. Do you need some makeup and an outfit? Yes, Vanessa gasped. Hannah, you are literally the best person. She reached to hug the girl, then remembered the blood just in time. Are you going to go all the way back to my house? I can. Your makeup is there. Is there a specific outfit you wanted? Nessa pondered the contents of her closet. She had a lot of options. Where was Dawn planning on taking her? She wanted to look good, but not too casual. He'd only seen her in sweats or in costume. She couldn't wait till he saw what she looked like when she tried to look nice. Grab that mini dress Versace sent over, she instructed. That should look great. Thanks again, Hannah. The girl nodded and Vanessa went to wash off in the trailer shower. It took way too much time to wash up. The blood in her hair was caked and dried. She had to rub her skin raw to go back to her pale shade, but she finally emerged clean and happy, ready to devour her food. The burger was absolute heaven. The cream sauce complemented it nicely. Nessa had suggested that Hannah mass produce the sauce, but the girl seemed content to give it to the people she liked. Nessa got most of it, but other cast and crew members were occasionally lucky as well. Nessa savored each bite, licking her fingers clean when she was done and lapping the leftover sauce from the plate. No one was around to judge. Then, wrapped in a nice soft robe, she went to her bedroom and collapsed on the mattress, out like a light. Her frantically beating heart and the urge to scream jolted Nessa awake. She glanced around wildly, trying to shove the nightmares she'd had from her mind. Screams, blood, and tears. It had been a while since she dreamed of murder. She'd gotten used to the insane scene she took part in. This one had seemed intense, though. She shivered as she crawled from bed. Emerging into the living area of the trailer, she was pleased Hannah had dropped off her stuff and even cleaned up lunch. Nessa grabbed the cosmetics bag, heading for the bathroom to get ready. She needed to give that girl a raise. Blood stained the shower. Nessa rinsed more off, sending red down the drain, and noticed blood under her nails. She scrubbed them clean before starting on her look. Natural appearing skin, lips a seductive dark red, and her hair in a loose bun were done effortlessly. Eat your heart out, Dawn, she murmured to her reflection. She slipped into the dress, sleeveless, short and form-fitting, and put on a simple pair of flats for comfort. Stepping outside, a chill came over her. Most film crews were inside their sound stages or done for the day, but the heavy silence was eerie, especially after her nightmare. She paused outside the stage door. A prop leaned against the wall, a machete covered in blood. She rolled her eyes, grabbing the handle to take it back inside. Extras really never understood how expensive realistic props were. The lights were on inside, but she didn't see any crew members or hear sound. There were still things scattered around, and food was still out on the table. Had everyone taken a break at the same time? Hello? Vanessa shouted. Guys? No answer. She walked towards the fake alleyway. Chad, Dawn, Hannah, are you here? Approaching the set, she saw a guy and girl on the ground with their arms around each other. She laughed. Caught you guys. It really isn't appropriate to fool around on set. She walked closer, but they didn't move. Not a great hiding place either. They still didn't move, even as she got closer. Maybe they were sleeping? Napping on set wasn't ideal, but everyone had been putting in long hours. She set down the prop and reached a hand for the girl, giving her a shake. Hey, wake up. The girl was still, too still. Vanessa rolled the girl onto her back. Dead. The young girl was going stiff, cold, and stared with wide, startled eyes. Vanessa knelt by the side of the body, not comprehending. She moved over to shift the boy. He was in the same state. Both had their throats slashed. They weren't moving, weren't breathing. She swallowed hard as she checked their pulses. There was nothing. She shoved herself backward, scrambling to her feet. Hello? She yelled again. Is this a closing day prank? These are really good dummies. We should use them for the next movie. Her pounding heart was the only reply. Come on, this isn't funny. She spun on her heel, determined to leave and not give them the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort. She froze and a small giggle escaped her throat. Chad was in the director's chair. He was slumped, so she'd been able to gloss over him when she approached the couple on the floor. His throat was cut, blood soaking his front. His skin was pale, eyes unseeing and mouth hanging open. Chad, she breathed. I didn't know you'd gotten into acting. Looking good. When he didn't respond, she inched closer. Closer. Is everyone in on this? Are the cameras to watch me freak out? She glanced around, then back at her dad. Taking a risk, she was met with no pulse. Okay, she whispered. This is a good dummy. These all are. Skin feels very real. As she moved her hand away from the wrist, her fingers grazed a scar. The scar on his wrist slightly raised. The scar he typically tried to keep hidden. He tried to take his own life when he was younger. She stared into his familiar eyes flecked with amber. Nessa fell to her knees and threw up the burger. When she was done retching, she heard movement to her right, somewhere in the dark. Whoever had done this was still here. She turned to run, grabbing the machete to have some protection. And I will stop there. If you want to see what is hiding in the dark, go ahead and get your copy of Collective Darkness, and you can find out who the murderer is.
Austin, go ahead.
Hello, I am Austin Slade Perry. I am the author of Crimson Snow, and today I will be doing a little reading for you all. I made my way to the master suite at the end of the upstairs hall. I paused at an open door as a cool breeze hit my face. This led up to the attic. Mr. Richards might have accidentally left a window open. I walked up the narrow winding staircase. As a child, the attic had been off limits. My siblings and I once dared one another to go up and see what it was like, though none of us made it past 3 steps. But the fear I had as a child was gone, and in its place was abject curiosity. Rows of dusty trunks and cardboard boxes stacked up against the short walls. A light bulb hung in the center of the room, but it wouldn't turn on. The window at the end of the room was open. I closed it. A loud crash from behind caused me to jump and turn. A thick book had fallen on the ground. I picked it up. It was the Tales of the Crimson Prince that my grandmother read to me as a child. I opened it to the first brightly colored page and smiled as I began to read. Long ago, on a mountain top, so covered with summer's warmth, dwelled a mighty kingdom. In the castle there lived a fair prince, with hair so red it earned him the title the Crimson Prince. Torin, Hayden's voice he called from the stairs. I think Matt and Becca are about finished getting settled in. If you still want to go sledding. I nodded to myself and placed the book back on the shelf where it had fallen. We spent most of the afternoon sledding down nearby hills. As the sun hid behind gray clouds, the wind picked up, becoming frigid and harsh. Was it supposed to snow this weekend? Hayden asked. I shook my head. No, not according to my phone. Becca and Matt climbed their way back up the hill, grinning from ear to ear. They handed the sleds off to us. Becca gave a quick countdown. On 3, we took off. Hayden's screams of laughter filled the air as I zoomed past him. We were going fast. Too fast. The cold had turned the snow into ice. Our speed combined with the falling snow and the hard wind made it difficult to steer. Difficult to see. I struggled to maintain a straight path down the hill and accidentally steered into a large bump. I flew through the air and tumbled into a tree. My eyes fluttered open, vision blurry, as my head pulsed in pain. A shadow figure moved amongst the trees, coming closer to me. I closed my eyes and opened them again. The figure was gone. There was nothing but the looming, frosted trees. My body shaking, I rolled over and stood. Vibrant red wildflowers littered the surrounding area. They were beautiful but unfamiliar. During my summer trips, I had never seen anything like these. They were so red. Oh my God, are you okay? Hayden called out to me. I'm fine, I said. Becca ran over and examined my head as my eyes remained fixed on the crimson flowers. Thank goodness you're okay. There's no blood or anything, Becca said, relieved. Why don't we call it a day and get some ice on Torn's head? Hayden held me close. I've never known flowers to bloom in winter, he muttered to himself on our way back. We spent the rest of the evening inside. As everyone made themselves comfortable around the fireplace, I settled at the far end of the living room and flipped through the pages of the Tales of the Crimson Prince. Each story was adorned with colorful patterns and images. These were my favorite tales. I knew all of the stories by heart, but there was a new one that I didn't recognize. Rather than the usual vibrant colors and images, its pages depicted gray and charcoal bare branches from an enormous dead tree, sprouting from stones and crusted earth. Behind the tree lurked a dark cloaked figure with black eyes that seemed to glow off the page. Bright red wildflowers scarcely dotted the page, providing the only color. The title of the story was handwritten in deep, scratched letters that read, The Lair of the Mountain King. I started to read. The Crimson Prince lived a life in a long summer. Never once had snow touched his cheek. Never once had he understood the winter night's chill, until the horn of winter was blown. A fallen warrior long forgotten woke deep below the mountain, and with him came winter. The more I read the story, the more I struggled to focus. There was something about the art in this passage that pushed me. The dark colors were discomforting, and the Mountain King's image was somehow haunting, as if he were looking directly at me. Perhaps I was tired. A lot had happened today. Hoping to clear my mind, I shut the book and excused myself to take a bath. The tub's pipe started with a rattle before a jet of hot water expelled from the faucet. Steam filled the room and as I peeled off my clothes and sunk myself into the water. When I emerged, the bathroom was gone. I stood waist deep in a hot spring next to a low-hanging black tree with frost clinging to the naked branches. The sky was dark, save for the faint blue light coming from the full moon. I was surrounded by a dense forest and crimson-colored flowers. I opened my mouth to speak, but was interrupted by the sound of something stepping into the water. And I'm going to stop right there. So if you want to know what is coming into the water, make sure you get your copy of Collective Darkness to finish reading Crimson Snow. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your work with us. That was wonderful. Before we end tonight, I wanted to give y'all a chance to talk about any upcoming projects you have. So please go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. I loved all your stories. I've read all of them 1,000 times, but it's so much funner to hear them from you. So one of our next things that we're going to have out is collective fantasy, and that one is coming in November. And then we also have the submissions are closed for that one, but yeah, or this not this November. Sorry, November 2021. But we do have submissions opened for another anthology coming out. It's called Collective Humanity, and it's going to be all the net proceeds are going to be going to an LGBTQ local Utah group here, the Golden Spike Empire. And it's going to be LGBTQ and allies who are able to, we encourage those to write, and it can be in horror, it can be dystopia, science fiction, and fantasy. So yeah, and then Jonathan also has another one as well.
Yeah, so other than that, we're going to have, actually before the fantasy one, we're doing a small book that is horror themed. It's going to be called Between the Darkness, because collective, the darkness between, sorry, we've switched back and forth in it. The darkness between, and because we did, the reception for our first book was so good that we decided, let's do another little one. And so that's going to come out next fall, actually before the fantasy one, for Halloween. And then we're going to be also working on, in addition to that and Collective Humanity, we'll also be doing a science fiction themed one, anthology that'll be called Collective Visions, that comes out spring 2022. And then we'll have a dystopian anthology that's way down the road, fall 2022, and it's going to be called Collective Chaos. So
yeah, so a lot of anthologies.
Yeah, anthologies.
Awesome.
So submit, please.
Yeah, do y'all have a website, or like do y'all or media links so people can stay up to date on the books you have coming out?
Sorry, I missed the first part of what you said.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, do y'all have a website or like social media presence that people can check out? Yeah.
Yeah, go on to Instagram, the at Collective Darkness. You can also and Collective Tales. Is it Collective Tales Publishing or Collective Tales?
It's Collective Tales Publishing, but it's like, I think there might be.
Okay, so in Collective Tales. And then you can also find us on www.collectivedarkness.com. So pretty easy.
Awesome.
Yeah. Twitter.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much. This was absolutely wonderful. We have copies in store right now. So if you liked what you heard tonight and you want to hear how the stories end, be sure to get a copy for yourself. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I hope that you all have a wonderful night.
Thanks. You too.
Goodbye.